Have you ever walked away from a conversation, replaying every word in your head, angry not at what the other person said, but at yourself for staying silent? Maybe it was a colleague who dismissed your idea with a smirk, a family member who cut you down in front of others, a friend who made a joke at your expense that went too far. You felt the sting, you felt the humiliation, and yet you smiled, nodded, or simply said nothing. Later, alone, the anger grew, not because of their words, but because of your silence. You ask yourself, why didn't I say something? Why did I let them treat me that way? The truth is uncomfortable. People don't disrespect you by accident. They do it because you allow them. It's a brutal realization. It's easier to blame them, to call them rude, arrogant, toxic. But here's what Stoicism would force you to see. Their behavior continued because your silence permitted it. Every time you swallowed your pride, every time you avoided conflict, every time you let the moment pass, you gave them permission. Think about this. No one can walk into your house unless you open the door. The same is true with disrespect. No one can step into your dignity unless you leave the gate unlocked. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Yet most of us flip this upside down. We think others must change so we can feel respected. We think if they would just act differently, we'd finally feel at peace. But that's a lie. Respect doesn't start with them. It starts with you, your boundaries, your standards, your response. Look back at the moments you felt most diminished. Was it truly their words that crushed you? Or was it your agreement, your silence that confirmed them? Here's the cruel irony. People test you, often unconsciously. They push to see where the line is. And if you don't draw it, they assume there isn't one. If you don't stop them, they will keep going. That's not evil, it's human nature. Imagine a child pulling at a thread on your sweater. If you say nothing, they'll pull harder. Not out of malice, but because no resistance tells them it's allowed. Adults are no different. Disrespect thrives not because of their strength, but because of your permission. And here's the part no one wants to admit. We allow it because of fear. Fear of confrontation. Fear of being disliked. Fear of losing connection. So we trade dignity for temporary peace. But that peace is false, because inside, you're at war with yourself. The Stoics knew this battle well. Epictetus, born a slave, endured humiliation daily. Yet he taught that no man can degrade you without your consent. He wasn't saying insults don't hurt. He was saying, your reaction, your choice, is the real battlefield. The world can spit venom, but it only burns if you swallow it. So ask yourself, how many times have you swallowed it? How many times have you handed people the weapon they used against you, your own silence? There's a pattern here, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Disrespect repeats itself not because the world is cruel, but because you train the world how to treat you. Every sigh you ignore, every laugh you pretend doesn't sting, every time you say, it's fine, don't worry about it, when it's not fine and you are worrying about it, you reinforce the lesson. They can get away with this, but let's be brutally honest. Aren't you tired? Tired of pretending it doesn't matter? Tired of walking away with clenched fists and unspoken words? Tired of being the one who keeps the peace at the cost of your own self-respect? The pain you feel isn't just about them. It's about you betraying yourself. It's about watching yourself become smaller than you are. That's why it lingers. That's why the memory haunts you. Because deep down, you know this. You were not born to live beneath anyone's heel. The Stoics lived under emperors, under armies, under forces they couldn't control. And yet, They guarded one thing with unbreakable strength: their inner sovereignty. The world could insult, enslave, or ignore them, but they refused to participate in their own diminishment. And that's the line you must draw. Because the problem isn't that people disrespect you, the problem is that you allow it. This is not about shouting louder, not about fighting back with anger. True Stoic strength isn't reaction, it's presence. It's the unshakable calm of someone who knows their worth and won't bargain it away for approval. So let me ask again, how many times have you walked away from a moment of disrespect, only to replay it in your mind 1,000 times? How much energy have you lost to battles you never even fought, because you surrendered before they began? The hook is here, and it cuts deep. You are disrespected because you allowed it, and until you stop allowing it, nothing will change. Why does disrespect keep finding its way into your life? Why does it echo in your workplace, your friendships, your family? Why does it feel like, no matter how much you try to be nice, people still cute across your dignity? Because the pattern is clear, you've trained them. Let's strip away the excuses. People don't suddenly wake up and decide, I will disrespect this person today. No, what happens is simpler. They see a door left unlocked. They test it. It opens. And once it opens, they keep using it. That unlocked door is your silence. Think about the last time someone said something that stung you. Maybe they rolled their eyes when you spoke. Maybe they cut you off mid-sentence. Maybe they laughed at your effort. And what did you do? Did you calmly but firmly hold your ground? Or did you let it slide, thinking, it's not worth the conflict? That moment matters more than you think, because by letting it slide, you taught them something. This behavior has no consequences, and people remember that lesson. They carry it into the next interaction, and the next, until it becomes a habit. Here's the ugly truth. Disrespect is rarely a single event. It's a pattern. And patterns don't form unless both sides participate. You might say, but I didn't do anything. Exactly. You didn't. And that was the problem. Let's call it what it is. Self-betrayal. Every time you allow disrespect to pass unchallenged, you betray yourself. You betray the dignity inside you that whispers, this is not okay. You silence it. You suffocate it. And over time, that silence becomes your identity. You become the person who doesn't push back. You become the one we can joke about. You become the easy target. And once that identity sticks, it's hard to shake off, because you've been complicit in building it. The Stoics would not sugarcoat this. Epictetus, who endured slavery, said plainly, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because standing your ground, drawing boundaries, refusing to participate in disrespect, these things will make people uncomfortable. They may think you're cold. They may think you're arrogant. They may think you've changed. But here's the question. Would you rather be mislabeled, or would you rather continue to be diminished? Too many people choose diminishment because it feels safer. We fear losing relationships. We fear rocking the boat. We fear that if we assert ourselves, people will leave us. And yet those who disrespect you have already left you, not physically, but in spirit. They've left respect behind. They've left dignity behind. They've already abandoned the very foundation of a relationship, so what are you clinging to? Here's the paradox. The more you tolerate disrespect in order to keep the peace, the less peace you actually feel. Outwardly, there may be silence. Inwardly, there's a storm of regret, bitterness, and shame. You're not keeping peace. You're just delaying war, a war inside your own chest. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, you deserve to live. Stop allowing your mind to be a slave. What chains your mind more than anything else? Not insults, not conflict, but your own refusal to act when action is required. That is slavery of the spirit. Let's go deeper. Why do you allow it? Because of fear. Fear is the root. You fear being alone. You fear confrontation. You fear being misunderstood. You fear rejection. But what you don't realize is that every time you let disrespect pass, you're already living in rejection of yourself. What greater loneliness exists than being a stranger to your own dignity? The Stoics called this living contrary to nature. Your nature is not to shrink, not to play small, not to hand away your worth for crumbs of approval. Your nature is to stand, to act with reason, to embody integrity. When you step away from that, you suffer not because others hurt you, but because you wound yourself. That's why the disrespect lingers in your memory. That's why you replay it at night. That's why it burns hours, days, even years after it happened. It's not just about them, it's about the fact that you allowed it. So here is the problem laid bare. Disrespect repeats because silence permits it. Silence comes from fear. Fear grows when you betray yourself. Self-betrayal hardens into identity, and identity becomes destiny. Unless you break the cycle, this is the brutal mirror Stoicism holds up. It doesn't flatter you. It doesn't tell you it's all their fault. It forces you to admit you are part of the problem. And until you own that, you cannot be free. So let me ask you directly, how many years of your life will you continue to live in a world where your worth is negotiable? How many times will you nod along to jokes that cut you down? How many conversations will you replay at night, whispering the words you wish you had said, but never did? The problem isn't that people are cruel. The problem is that you've trained them to believe you'll take it. But if you train them into it, you can train them out of it. And that is where the Stoic fix begins. There is a reason why disrespect cuts deeper than most wounds. It doesn't just touch your ears. It doesn't just brush against your skin. It pierces the very core of who you think you are. When someone dismisses you, it's not only their words you hear. It's your own hidden doubts echoing back at you. Their insult lands because it collides with your insecurity. Their mockery burns because somewhere in you, a voice whispers, maybe they're right. This is why it lingers. A physical bruise fades, but the bruise to your dignity replays in your mind, again and again. Let's be honest. Disrespect doesn't just hurt, it humiliates. And humiliation is not about the other person, it's about you, standing there, seeing yourself shrink. You hate them for doing it, but more than that, you hate yourself for letting it happen. That's why you replay the conversation 1,000 times, not because of what they said, but because of what you didn't. It's a cycle of shame, and shame is the most corrosive of emotions, because it convinces you to stay quiet even longer. You tell yourself, I should have said something, but now it's too late. If I bring it up later, I'll look weak. So the silence deepens, and the pattern continues. Now, add fear into the mix. Fear whispers, if I speak up, they'll get angry. If I push back, I'll lose them. If I show my boundaries, they'll walk away. And so you choose the lesser pain, you accept the disrespect. You say nothing, but in reality, you've chosen the greater pain, the one that eats you alive from the inside. Marcus Aurelius warned against this kind of surrender. He wrote, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." And isn't that what happens here? You don't live. You exist in other people's shadow, shaping yourself to avoid conflict, shrinking yourself to fit into the comfort of others. This is why so many people walk through life with a quiet anger simmering beneath the surface. They laugh at the joke, but their chest is tight. They nod at the criticism, but their jaw is clenched. They smile at the insult, but their heart is heavy. And then later they explode, not at the person who disrespected them, but at themselves, at loved ones, at innocent bystanders. Because suppressed anger never disappears. It leaks. It spills over into the wrong places. That's the tragedy. By allowing disrespect, you don't just harm yourself, you harm everyone around you. You become resentful. You become bitter. And bitterness poisons everything it touches. Epictetus said, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." He wasn't excusing the offender. He was redirecting the spotlight. Why? Because the real issue isn't what they said. It's why you allowed it to wound you so deeply. And here's another emotional distortion. You convince yourself that enduring disrespect makes you noble. You call it patience. You call it tolerance. You call it maturity. But in truth, it's cowardice dressed as virtue. You're not being noble. You're avoiding the discomfort of confrontation. There's a difference between patience and passivity. Patience is strength under control. Passivity is weakness, pretending to be peace. The Stoics practiced patience, but never passivity. They endured what they could not control, but they never permitted what they could. So, ask yourself, are you truly practicing Stoic tolerance? Or are you simply afraid? Let's stretch the emotion further. Think about how disrespect reshapes your identity. After enough insults, enough dismissals, you start to question your own worth. You think, maybe I am not valuable. Maybe I don't deserve respect. And this is the most dangerous place to be. Because once you accept that belief, you stop asking for respect at all. You adjust your standards downward. You normalize a mistreatment. You stop being shocked when people cross the line. This is why some people end up in toxic relationships, toxic workplaces, toxic friendships, not because they love pain, but because they've convinced themselves that it's all they're worth. But the Stoics would shake you awake here. They would remind you, your worth is not negotiable. It doesn't depend on their approval. It doesn't shrink because of their words. Your worth is rooted in your reason, your virtue, your ability to live in accordance with nature, and that cannot be touched by mockery or insult unless you hand it over. So why does it feel like it can be touched? Because your emotions have been distorted. You've placed too much weight on their opinion and too little on your own. You've outsourced your dignity. You've let the world become the judge of your value. That's why the pain cuts so deep, because you've given them the gavel. Now, let's step back. What happens emotionally when you finally recognize this? At first, rage. Rage that you've been treated this way. Rage at the people who took advantage. Rage at yourself for cooperating. But if you stay with that rage, if you let it boil, it will consume you. Stoicism offers another path. To see clearly, to name the distortion, to realize the true enemy is not them, it is your own complicity. This realization is painful, but liberating, because if you are part of the problem, you can also be part of the solution, and that's where the emotional expansion leads us, from shame to clarity, from fear to resolve. Disrespect hurts because you let it echo inside, but the moment you stop allowing it, the echo fades. The wound only remains open as long as you keep reopening it. So here's the turning point. You must stop pretending that silence is peace, that endurance is strength, that tolerance is stoic. It is not. Silence can be cowardice. Endurance can be self-betrayal. Tolerance can be surrender. And every time you confuse the two, you bleed. This is why the Stoic fix matters, because it doesn't just heal the insult. It heals the distorted beliefs that made you vulnerable to it in the first place. And once you begin to see that the shame, the fear, the anger, all of it transforms. It becomes fuel. Not fuel for revenge, but fuel for dignity. Because here is the truth. Stoicism insists on, no one can make you small without your permission, and the day you withdraw that permission is the day disrespect dies. Let me tell you a story. Not about a philosopher in ancient Rome, not about an emperor or a general, but about someone who could easily be you. His name was Daniel. Daniel was smart, hard-working. He never made trouble. At work, he was the dependable one, the one who stayed late when others left early, the one who quietly fixed mistakes without asking for credit, the one who said yes when everyone else said no. At first, people liked him for it. His boss praised his team spirit. His co-workers leaned on him. He felt useful, needed, respected. But then, something shifted. The praise stopped. The requests became demands. The gratitude disappeared, replaced by expectation. And when Daniel tried to speak up in meetings, people cut him off. When he offered ideas, people smirked. When deadlines came crashing down, the hardest work always landed on his desk. At lunch, jokes started circling little barbs about him being too nice, about him being the office doormat. They laughed. He smiled weakly, said nothing, but inside, he felt the burn. Night after night, Daniel replayed those moments. The sarcastic comment, the dismissive glance, the smirk when he spoke. He clenched his fists in the dark, whispering to himself the words he wished he had said. That's not okay. But the next day, he went back. Some desk, same silence, same smile. Why? Because he told himself it wasn't worth it. Because he feared that if he pushed back, they would turn on him. Because he thought patience was virtue. But it wasn't patience. It was permission. And everyone around him learned the same lesson. Daniel will take it. The breaking point came one Friday afternoon. Daniel had spent weeks preparing a project. He poured himself into it, every detail sharp, every flaw covered. During the meeting, he presented it with quiet pride. And when he finished, silence filled the room. Then, one of his colleagues, a man who had done none of the work, leaned back in his chair and said, "That's fine, but let's hear from someone who actually knows what they're doing." The room erupted in laughter. His boss smirked. Daniel felt his throat tighten, his face flush. For a second, the old Daniel almost appeared the one who would smile, pretend it didn't hurt, move on. But something inside him cracked. That night, at home, he opened a book he had been skimming for months, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. His eyes landed on a line he had underlined before, but never truly absorbed. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He read it again, slowly, and this time it struck like lightning. Strength was not waiting for others to treat him better. Strength was setting the boundary within himself and living by it. The next Monday, Daniel walked into the office differently. He didn't storm in with anger. He didn't plot revenge. He simply carried himself as though his dignity was non-negotiable. When the same colleague tried another sarcastic jab, Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't look down. He looked him directly in the eye and said, calmly, but firmly, "That's not acceptable." The room went silent. No shouting, no drama, just a boundary spoken out loud. Something shifted. People who had grown comfortable mocking him suddenly felt exposed. The laughter stopped. The smirks faded. From that day, Daniel was no longer the office doormat. He became someone different, not because others changed overnight, but because Daniel changed. He stopped permitting what diminished him. This is the Stoic way. You don't fight every insult with rage. You don't demand respect with loud words. You embody it quietly, firmly, consistently. You teach people how to treat you by how you treat yourself. And the results ripple. Daniel didn't just regain dignity at work, he carried it into his friendships, into his family. He stopped saying yes when he meant no. He stopped laughing at jokes that weren't funny. He stopped living small. The world around him adjusted, slowly, but undeniably. And here's the crucial part. Daniel wasn't special. He wasn't born fearless. He wasn't a natural leader. He was simply a man who finally decided to stop betraying himself. That's all it takes. Because disrespect doesn't survive in the presence of someone who won't host it. Think about that. Like smoke without air. It suffocates when there's no permission to breathe. So now, let me turn the mirror back to you. Where are you, Daniel, right now? Where are you laughing at jokes that wound you? Where are you staying silent while resentment builds? Where are you training people to treat you as less? And more importantly, when will you stop? Because the moment you decide, like Daniel, that your dignity is not up for negotiation, the world has no choice but to see you differently. This is not arrogance. This is not pride. This is clarity. The clarity that says, I will not allow myself to be part of my own diminishment. That is the Stoic fix. Daniel's story is not unique. It is the silent story of millions, and perhaps it is your story too. The pattern is always the same. Disrespect does not arrive like a storm without warning. It creeps in quietly, feeds on silence, and grows stronger each time it is permitted. It is not the words of others alone that cut us down, but the quiet complicity of our own inaction. When Daniel first stayed quiet after that dismissive joke, he sent a message. He told his colleagues without speaking, "You can treat me this way, and I will not resist." That single silence was not harmless. It was permission, and once permission is given, it is rarely taken back. The Stoics would call this living beneath the standard of reason. Reason alerts us when something violates our dignity, yet fear muffles reason. And once fear becomes louder than wisdom, a man no longer trusts himself to act. That is why silence is so dangerous. It is not peace. It is not patience. It is the slow surrender of self-respect disguised as virtue. Daniel thought he was being cooperative, patient, humble, but in reality, he was simply afraid. Afraid of confrontation, afraid of being labeled difficult, afraid of rejection. This is the deception of fear. It wears the mask of tolerance. But Stoicism tears away that mask and shows the truth. Forgiveness without boundaries is not strength, it is surrender. Marcus Aurelius wrote that a man's worth is measured by the worth of his ambitions. If your only ambition is to avoid conflict, then you have already reduced your worth to the lowest level. That was Daniel's mistake for years. He hoped respect would come naturally, that others would see his effort and reward it. But respect is never granted as charity. It is recognized only in those who live as if their worth is non-negotiable. When Daniel finally drew a line and said calmly, "That's not acceptable," he did not suddenly become powerful because others changed. He became powerful because he stopped participating in his own diminishment. This is the Stoic way. You do not need to shout to be heard, nor demand to be respected. You embody respect by living with clarity. You show others, without drama, that certain behavior will not pass here. Boundaries are not cages, they are mirrors. When you speak them clearly, you are not trying to control others. You are showing them the truth of what you will and will not allow. And once the mirror is clear, people adjust. Some retreat, some rise, but you remain intact. The deeper truth is that the real battle was never between Daniel and his colleagues. It was between Daniel and himself. The night before he spoke up, When he sat alone and read Marcus Aurelius, he finally admitted something he had resisted for years. I am part of this problem. That was the turning point, long before any words were spoken aloud. And that is where every true Stoic transformation begins, not in fighting others, but in facing oneself. If you are distressed by insults, Marcus wrote, the pain is not caused by the thing itself, but by your judgment of it. And that judgment is yours to revoke at any moment. Daniel revoked his. The next day, he walked into his office, no longer willing to feed the illusion that he was small, and the world shifted. So, how do you take this shift into your own life? You begin by deciding clearly what you will not allow. Most people never do this. They simply float, hoping others will respect them by instinct. But the world does not work that way. Without clarity, there are no boundaries. You must decide, I will not accept mockery disguised as humor. I will not tolerate constant interruption. I will not carry guilt placed on me by manipulation. Once you know what you do not allow, you carry yourself differently. You no longer hesitate after the insult. You already know where the line is. Then you must learn the difference between two kinds of silence. There is the silence of fear, the silence that swallows anger and lets wounds fester. And there is the silence of presence, the silence that carries weight, the silence that refuses to be drawn into games. The Stoics practiced this second kind. They knew when to speak, and they knew when a simple pause or a calm gaze spoke louder than 100 angry words. When Daniel said, "That's not acceptable," he spoke few words, but the weight of them was felt precisely because he had stopped filling the room with excuses. Finally, you must detach yourself from the desperate need for approval. Disrespect only stings because you have anchored your worth in the opinions of others. As long as your dignity is outsourced, every sneer will feel like a dagger. The Stoic path is radical. Anchor your worth in virtue, in integrity, in the knowledge that you are living rightly. Some will respect it, some will walk away. Both are victories. Epictetus taught, if you want to be respected, respect yourself. That is where all lasting dignity begins. Disrespect is a knot, tied not by others alone, but by you as well. Each time you excuse what corrodes you, laugh at what wounds you, or stay silent to avoid discomfort, you pull the knot tighter. Untangling it requires courage, the courage to admit your role, to withdraw your permission, and to begin living as though your worth cannot be traded away. You cannot stop people from trying to test you, but you can stop cooperating with their attempts. You cannot guarantee respect from others, but you can guarantee self-respect. And once you do, the world quickly learns what Daniel's world learned. This is not someone to belittle. Daniel's colleagues did not suddenly become virtuous. They simply adjusted to a new reality. The old Daniel was gone, and once he was gone, the disrespect had no air to breathe. That is the untangling of the knot. That is the Stoic fix. Think back again to the last time you walked away from a moment of disrespect. Remember how heavy it felt. Now, multiply that by every time it has happened in your life. The pattern becomes undeniable. It is not one isolated moment. It is a thread that weaves itself through your entire existence. At work, disrespect shows up as the colleague who cuts you off in meetings, the boss who piles on responsibilities without acknowledgement, the team that jokes at your expense. You tell yourself it is office culture, that you should not take it personally. But each time you remain silent, the culture strengthens and your dignity shrinks. Offices are not built from stone walls, they are built from habits. And the habit of your silence has become mortar in those walls. In family, disrespect arrives differently. It might be the sibling who mocks you in front of others, the parent who dismisses your choices, the partner who uses guilt to control you. Here, silence feels even heavier because you tell yourself that family is sacred, that peace is more important than pride. But peace without dignity is not peace. It is slavery under a softer name. Love is not an excuse to endure belittlement. True love demands respect, or it is not love at all. In friendships, disrespect is dressed as humor, sarcasm, inside jokes that cut too deep. You laugh along because to protest feels like weakness, or worse, like being too serious. But tell me, how many laughs have you faked while your heart burned? How many times have you smiled through betrayal? A friend who chips away at your dignity is not a friend. They are a thief in disguise, and you have been handing them the key. In relationships, disrespect is perhaps most insidious. You excuse it as stress, as mood, as temporary. You convince yourself that endurance is love. But endurance without boundaries is not noble. It is poison. You say you are staying for love, but you are really staying because you fear being alone. And so, the disrespect grows, one drop at a time, until you no longer recognize the person in the mirror. Do you see the pattern? It is everywhere. It crosses contexts. It wears many masks. But the root is always the same. It exists because you allow it. This is why Stoicism insists on repetition, because the mind resists this truth. You want to say, "It's not my fault." You want to say, "They shouldn't treat me this way." And yes, they shouldn't. But the Stoics are not interested in what should be. They are interested in what is, and what is this. People will continue until you stop them. Think about the difference between two people. One allows themselves to be interrupted in every conversation, smiles nervously, and quickly lets others take control. The other pauses, speaks calmly, and continues until their point is finished. Who do you respect more? Who do you take more seriously? The answer is obvious, and the same principle applies to you. You cannot blame others for walking through doors you refuse to close. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you cannot control the minds of others. You can only control your own. That means you cannot force them to respect you, but you can refuse to give them a stage to perform their disrespect. And when you refuse, the performance ends. So let's repeat this truth across every part of your life. In work, you are disrespected because you allowed it. In family, you are disrespected because you allowed it. In love, you are disrespected because you allowed it. In friendship, you are disrespected because you allowed it. Our context feels different, but the principle never changes. And what happens when you stop allowing it? The shift is almost immediate. At first, people will resist. They will say you've changed. They will accuse you of being cold, difficult, arrogant. That is because they have grown addicted to your compliance. When you withdraw it, they go through withdrawal. Do not mistake their discomfort for your failure. It is the first sign that your boundaries are working. Over time, something remarkable happens. The people who never respected you drift away. The people who do respect you step closer, and new people appear. People who only recognize you in your stronger form. The entire environment shifts because you finally stopped betraying yourself. This is not theory. This is not philosophy locked in books. This is life, real, daily life. And you already know it is true because you have felt it. You have seen how one act of silence trained others to continue. And you have seen, or at least imagined, how one act of firmness could have stopped it. So let me repeat it again, until it carves itself into your mind. You are disrespected because you allowed it. You are disrespected because you allowed it. You are disrespected because you allowed it. Say it with me. Whisper it if you must. Shout it if you can. Let it echo until it replaces the excuses. until it silences the lies you've told yourself about patience and peace, because only when this truth is burned into you can you begin to change. And remember, change does not mean rage. It does not mean shouting or violence or revenge. The Stoic path is not chaos. It is clarity. You do not demand respect. You live in a way that makes it undeniable. You do not beg for dignity. You guard it like a fortress. From now on, every time you hear a sarcastic remark, every time you feel the sting of dismissal, every time you catch yourself laughing at pain, pause. Ask yourself, am I allowing this? If the answer is yes, then you already know the fix. Withdraw your permission. Close the door. Stop being a host for disrespect. And if you do, watch how quickly the air changes. Disrespect suffocates without consent. It cannot breathe where it is not invited. This is the message, repeated like a drumbeat, across your work, your home, your relationships, your friendships. The same principle holds. The world treats you as you train it to, and the training begins and ends with you. Pause for a moment. Forget the noise of the world. Forget the people who mock, the ones who dismiss, the ones who cut you down. Look inward, because the true battlefield is not out there. It is here inside your chest, in the quiet corners of your own mind. Ask yourself, how many times in your life have you given silent permission for your own dignity to be eroded? How many times did you smile through the sting of humiliation? How many times did you tell yourself it wasn't worth it while knowing deep down that it was costing you everything? You can probably count dozens of moments, maybe hundreds. The dinner table conversations where your voice was ignored, the relationship where your boundaries were crossed again and again, the workplace where your ideas were stolen or dismissed, the so-called friends who laughed at your pain. And in every single moment, there was a choice. Perhaps you didn't see it then, but it was there. The choice to stand or to shrink, to speak or to stay silent, to respect yourself or to betray yourself. The truth is difficult, but liberating. Every time you chose silence, you weren't protecting peace, you were abandoning yourself. Sit with that for a moment. Feel the weight of it. Because if you can face that truth without flinching, you can finally be free of it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Read that again slowly. You love yourself more than anyone, yet you treat their opinion as heavier than your own. Why? Why do you give away your power so cheaply? Why do you let their words shape you, while your own judgment remains locked away? What would change if, for once, you valued your own view of yourself above theirs? If your self-respect was no longer negotiable currency, but an unbreakable law? Imagine this. You are at a table. Someone makes a cruel remark. You feel the familiar burn in your chest, but instead of laughing it off, instead of swallowing it, you meet their eyes and say, calmly, "That's not acceptable." The silence that follows is heavy, uncomfortable, but in that silence, something shifts. Not just in them, in you. For the first time, you walked away without betraying yourself. For the first time, you kept your dignity intact. Now, imagine that repeated, day after day. No grand speeches, no explosions of anger, just steady, calm clarity. Over time, your world rearranges itself. The people who cannot respect you disappear. The ones who can step closer, and you yourself feel lighter, stronger, more alive. But before that change can happen, you must face this one haunting question. How long will you continue to live as though your worth is negotiable? How many more years will you let the same cycle repeat? How many more nights will you replay conversations in your mind, whispering the words you wish you had said? How many more times will you look in the mirror and see a stranger staring back, a stranger who compromised, who swallowed pain, who chose silence? The Stoics would tell you, the only chains strong enough to bind you are the ones you place on yourself. External insults, external disrespect, they are sparks, but they only ignite a fire if you provide the fuel. Withdraw the fuel, and the fire dies. So ask yourself, what fuel are you providing? Fear, the desire for approval, the unwillingness to face discomfort. If so, then the fire of disrespect will keep burning. But if you withdraw that fuel, if you choose clarity over fear, then the fire has nowhere to go. Epictetus, who knew humiliation better than most, gave us this challenge. If someone treats you with contempt or wrongs you, remember, they do so because they think it is their right. Show them it is not. Notice the emphasis. Show them not with rage, not with endless explanations, with the quiet strength of a person who will not collaborate in their own humiliation. Let this sink in, because this is not about others. It never was. It is about you, about the way you carry yourself, the way you decide, the way you stand. Respect begins with you, or it does not begin at all. So here is the deep reflection I invite you into. Where have you given permission for disrespect in your life? What fears have kept you silent? What lies have you told yourself to make your silence sound like virtue? And most of all, what would it look like if you stopped? Not tomorrow, not in a year. Now, picture yourself walking into your next conversation with the quiet strength of a Stoic. Picture yourself refusing to laugh at a cruel joke. Picture yourself holding your ground when someone tries to cut you down. Picture yourself finally living without betraying yourself. That vision is not fantasy. It is simply a decision away. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that he would meet people who were arrogant, cruel, and disrespectful. He did not pray that the world would change. He prepared himself to remain intact. That is the Stoic way, not begging for easier people, but becoming stronger yourself. And that is the reflection I leave you with. You are disrespected because you allowed it. But you can stop allowing it today. The chains are not on their hands. They are on yours. Remove them, because the most painful truth is also the most liberating one. No one can take your dignity unless you give it away. And the moment you stop giving it, you are free. So here we are. We have walked through the pain, the silence, the shame, the anger. We have pulled apart the threads of disrespect and seen the knot for what it truly is. And the truth, though sharp, is also freeing. You are disrespected because you allowed it. But that does not have to be your story anymore. Think about it. In every moment ahead, you carry the choice. A cruel remark mai come, a dismissive glance, a joke meant to cut. You cannot control that. But you can control the one thing that matters most, whether you allow it to land. The Stoics remind us that the external world will never bend to our desires. People will continue to test, to mock, to dismiss. That is their burden to carry. Yours is simpler, but far greater, to live in such a way that your dignity is beyond their reach. This doesn't mean you must shout. It doesn't mean you must fight. It means you stand quietly, firmly, unshakably in yourself. You draw the line. You stop betraying yourself. From that place, life begins to shift. Relationships reorder themselves. The people who never truly respected you fade into the background. The ones who can respect you draw nearer. And most importantly, you begin to respect yourself again. That is the deepest victory. Remember this. You will never control whether others respect you. But you can always control whether you respect yourself, and when you do, the world learns quickly what you are willing and unwilling to allow. So let the final words echo in you like a steady drumbeat. No one can diminish you without your consent. Withdraw that consent, and you are untouchable. Carry this with you into your next conversation, your next meeting, your next difficult moment. Let your silence be strong, your words be few but firm, your presence unshakable. That is the Stoic way. And when the world tries again, as it surely will remember that you do not need to be anyone's victim, you can choose differently now, because dignity is not begged for, it is lived, and the moment you live it, you are free. If this message has struck something in you, if you felt the sting of recognition, if you saw yourself in these words, know this: you are not alone. Many walk this same path. Many carry the same silent shame, but many also awaken and choose a different road. Today, you can join them. The journey does not end here. The Stoic path is long, but it is steady. And in our next reflection, we will explore how to build an unshakable presence so that respect is not just reclaimed, but sustained. Until then, carry this truth quietly in your chest. Respect begins and ends with you. Guard it well.